In the beginning part of this course, you learn to play the 5 pentatonic patterns. Now these shapes are the foundation for improvising lead guitar. They must be memorized to the point that recalling them is automatic. This will enable you to play a lead in any key all over the fretboard. A big part of this series of lessons is to make this scale information useful. Memorizing scales isn't helpful unless you're able to use them on the fly while improvising. You must get past the point that these patterns sound like scales instead of lead guitar riffs. We're going to make these shapes sound musical instead of just like scale exercises. Exercise 1 is the first pentatonic pattern in A minor at the 5th fret. First, use a metronome or Guitar Pro tab to see how fast you could play this pattern before beginning the lesson. By how fast, I mean, what's your current max tempo, playing it clean without making mistakes. We'll begin exercise 1 at 70 beats per minute. If you use Guitar Pro software, you can use the metronome file to test your current max tempo. Now, this metronome file is in the Guitar Pro course materials folder. If your picking motion is too slow, there's a very good chance that you're holding the pick too tightly. A lightly held pick and softly picked strings is necessary for speed. The faster I play, the looser I hold the pick. A rigid pick gets caught in the strings and this slows you down. Adjust the tempo of this exercise to make it challenging for your level of playing experience. After finding your current max tempo, write it down in a text document and keep track of your progress. If your max tempo is 70 beats per minute or less, gradually increase the tempo of this exercise by 5 beats per minute over the next week. That's just like 1 beat per day. If your max tempo is beyond 70 beats per minute, you may only be able to increase the tempo by just 2 beats per minute this week. If you expect to progress faster than this, you may be disappointed. So let's focus on realistic, attainable goals. If you would like to loop this exercise in Guitar Pro, I recommend deleting the first measure, then renaming the file, and save it. This lesson can be accomplished without installing the Guitar Pro software, but why not take advantage of this technology so you can improve as fast as possible? Your time is valuable. Get the most from your practice. Exercise 2 is the same as exercise 1, except for one thing. It's written in 8th note triplets. There are 12 8th note triplets per measure instead of 16 16th notes. If you're not capable of playing 16th notes at fast tempos, you'll find 8th note triplets to be a nice tweener. You're playing faster than just 8th notes, but not as fast as 16th notes. Notice that the 16th notes in exercise 1 at 70 beats per minute are played at the exact same speed as the 8th notes in exercise 2 at 87 beats per minute. Still, 8th note triplets aren't just about speed. When you play 3 notes per beat, it changes the rhythm and the feel of the composition. You should be practicing at least an hour a day, 5 days a week. Otherwise, progress will be slow and maybe even non-existent. If you're consistently practicing with dedication, you should be able to master each of these lessons in a week. If at any time you find yourself stuck, that you're not able to play the exercises at the recommended tempo, you've gone too far in the course. Go back 4 or more weeks and see if you can play that lesson with confidence. This information is to be learned a step at a time. When you're working on a lesson beyond your skill level, progress will slow or maybe even grind to a halt. When you're looping exercise 1, playing it over and over again, there is one place that you'll have a problem, and I'll show you where. You play this twice, this note twice, the C. Now when you're playing it slow, that doesn't seem like a big deal. But as you increase the tempo, that will be the place that will give you a little bit of a problem. And also, when you're looping, you'll play this A twice. So practice these two sections. And you'll also find that patterns like this make for some real interesting lead shapes. Check out exercise 3 now. It shows this pick movement on the 1st and 2nd strings and on the 5th and 6th strings. In each of the next 4 weeks, we'll cover a single pentatonic pattern. Exercise 4, each week will be used to build a lead, moving from pattern to pattern. So there will be a lick from pattern 1, then 2 the following week, 3, and so on. I want you to understand that these licks are actually from the pattern instead of just a bunch of notes of uncertain origin. In exercise 4, the first measure is the intro count. The next 2 measures are the lead lick from pattern 1 of the pentatonic scale. After the lead lick, the next 2 measures are 16th notes from the first pattern of the pentatonic scale. Then there are 2 blank measures for you to improvise using only notes from the first pattern. At the end of the 7th measure, I include a cymbal that's hitting on the 8th note triplet to give you a feel for the rhythm of the 8th note triplets that are coming up. And they come up in the 8th and 9th measures. These are the triplets. There's a good chance that you'll find it difficult to pick up the rhythm of these notes. That's okay. This is to demonstrate the different rhythm and feel created by these triplets. I don't expect perfection here. I just want to give you something to think about. If you're using Guitar Pro, mute the lead guitar track and practice improvising over this backing track. The backing track is also included in the additional materials for this lesson as an MP3 file, and the Guitar Pro file is also in the additional materials. Next thing I'm going to talk about is preventing repetitive movement injuries, because you'll be doing a lot of that while you're practicing these licks, repetitive movements. Now, the upside, of course, is you will embed these in your subconscious, and the licks and leads and scales will become automatic. Now for the downside. Repetitive movement can cause injury to your fretting arm, wrist, or hand, but this can be avoided. When you're standing on stage, you might want your guitar hanging down to your knees so it looks really cool. I have no problem with that, but it's no way to practice repetitive movement. To avoid injury, try to keep your wrist, hand, and forearm flat, or as flat as possible. When your guitar is slung low, your wrist will bend, especially to play the lower strings, like that. So how do we keep the wrist as flat as possible? It begins with your physique. We're all built differently. Your arms may be short or long. This affects the wrist angle. Hands can be large or small. You need to observe your own personal playing technique to see what needs to be altered to keep your wrist flat during repetitive practice. It's easy to keep your thumb in the middle of the back of the neck when playing the first two strings on the first few frets. As you move up the neck, it will be necessary to move the thumb higher. Play at the first pattern of the pentatonic scale at the 17th fret. So you're way up here, and observe your wrist angle. When playing high on the neck, guitarists don't raise the neck like this just to look cool. It actually makes the 5th and 6th strings accessible, and it keeps your wrist fairly flat. I also need to position my thumb over the neck when I'm way up there, once again, to reach the lower strings. If my thumb is in the middle of the neck, it makes me really have to reach, and my wrist bends. The thumb over the neck is also great for playing a blues vibrato. You can't do that with the thumb in the middle of the neck. Okay, your assignment this week is to spend at least 20 minutes a day playing these exercises. Over the next week, try to move the speed of the metronome up from 2 to 5 beats per minute. In the next lesson, we'll cover similar exercises for the second pattern. See you next week.